So this session is going to be just a little bit different than some of the others. There are two of us, so I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to let Nate introduce himself, and he's going to send back to me. I'm going to make about 15 minutes worth of comments, sharing some information with you, then I'll turn it back to Nate. He's going to share about 15 minutes worth, and then we're going to open it up to questions because we assumed there would be a small group, and we want to know what's on your mind. So we will be happy to share what we know at that point after we've given you some background information. So I will start, and I am Kelly Watkins. I am with the Kentucky DEC. I am also newly elected to the national board, so I am delighted for that. My day job that pays the bills that allows me to volunteer for those is I am president of Expressive Concepts. We do leadership development training, consulting, and executive coaching. So we go into corporations and we help fill the gap. You already have an HR department, you already have certain training. You need a specific type of training for a small group of leaders or a team or maybe even one individual. And we provide that highly customized training to meet that particular need. We also work with international professionals who are here in the United States working. My definition of that would be someone who was born outside of the U.S., who does not speak English as their first language, who is here working in the United States, typically a professional. This person may need some professional development, leadership development, the same as anybody else in the corporation. But they also need a little extra help of someone who understands their cultural backgrounds and how that impacts their leadership style as well. So that's what my company does. I am also a part-time college professor, sometimes a full-time college professor. And a few years ago, I was teaching at Indiana University, the Kelley School of Business, and they asked me to create a course in the business school on Dubai. So I like to say when it comes to Dubai, I've written a book on it. Because after I created the course, I discovered there was no textbook. So I'm like, well, the students need something. So I wrote the textbook to go with the course. I started traveling and doing business in Dubai in 2007, and have been going back ever since. Let's see, what else? I think that's, lots of boards, lots of other things, but that's the gist of it. Just to clear up a little confusion, because people keep asking, I am with the Kentucky DEC. If you ask me where I'm from, I will say just outside of Louisville, Kentucky, but I actually live in southern Indiana. It is 10 minutes from Louisville, so I am a Hoosier. Maybe I can comment about that in a minute, I think. But I belong to the Kentucky DEC, so if you see a couple different name tags, that's why. So it is now my pleasure to let Nate LaMar introduce himself. He is tall enough to stand behind us.
Thank you, Kelly. The good news is, with so few here in the room, I don't think I need to worry about the microphone. Hopefully I can project loud enough. I'd like to thank the NADEC board for putting on an outstanding conference. I think there was a lot of pent-up demand being that we couldn't be here over the past couple of years. It's good to see some familiar faces though after 3 years. As Kelly mentioned, I do serve on the Indiana DEC. Some of you have my business card, Michigan and France, although listed in Washington, D.C. address. I work from home in Indiana, and I just report to an office here in D.C. on occasion. Just to fill you in on my background, I have served as a member of the Indiana District Export Council since 2003. In 2019, I was let me back up. In 2018, I began serving on the Trade Policy Committee at NADEC. In 2019, I was elected as one of the 2 Great Lakes states representatives on the NADEC board. Unfortunately, I did not run for re-election in 2021 due to downsizings at my previous employer, AM General. Laura Barney unfortunately broke the news to me today. I'm sorry, but you must be employed in an international business exporting job by July 31st. I wasn't, but I'm thankful that Kelly ran for my seat and won. So I feel that seat's in good hands. Robert Brown of the Kentucky DEC, he then invited me to join the advisory board for NADEC. So I'm thankful to be able to serve on the advisory board. NADEC is doing great things in our current world that has seen the pendulum of trade swing from free trade to an unfortunate era of protectionism that cuts both ways. But let me back up a little further. I graduated from West Point, the United States Military Academy, in 1989. I served primarily in Germany, secondarily in Jordan. My major at West Point was Middle Eastern Studies. That included 5 semesters of Arabic and 1 semester of Hebrew. The Army then put me through the Defense Language Institute's German program in Monterey, California, followed by counterterrorism school. Then I arrived at my unit in Germany. Following my honorable discharge from active duty, I returned home from Indiana. I tried my hand for a couple of years at being a high school foreign language teacher. It was in my blood. My father was a 5th generation teacher, elementary teacher. My mom is a retired 3rd generation elementary teacher. I discovered though after a couple of years it wasn't for me. So I went and got my MBA in international management at the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Glendale, Arizona, and haven't looked back. So since then, my career has been in international business, primarily with a company called Draper. Draper is a medium-sized manufacturer of audiovisual projection screens, window shades, and athletic equipment. During my 21 and a half years at Draper, I helped open the Middle East, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa and Central Asia for my employer. So today, although Kelly will be focusing on Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, I will therefore focus on other markets within the Middle East where I have experience. Due to the tariff on aluminum and steel, Draper disbanded its export department in the fall of 2019. I then was employed by AM General, the manufacturer of the Humvee in South Bend, Indiana. I worked from home for them for 6.5 months, but then some unfortunate, second quarter financials hit. For the severance package, I can't complain, though. I'm very thankful for that. And for about 1 month now, I've been serving GM Defense, General Motors Defense, and as Senior Manager of International Business Development, specifically responsible for EUCOM and SOUTHCOM, the European Command and the Southern Command. The European Command includes Europe and the Caucasus. The Southern Command includes all of Latin America except Mexico. NORTHCOM includes the United States, Canada, and Mexico. I will be picking up Mexico from that, and I will be helping my boss in Canada. AFRICOM, the African Command, has not yet been designated. That will most likely fall to me based on my experience there and my French and Portuguese language skills for Sub-Saharan Africa. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly for her opening statement, and we'll go from there. It's unfortunate that Sheriah Johnson, who was going to moderate this panel, had a death in the family. So please keep her and her family in your prayers. Kelly.
Thanks. Nate and I are the long and short of it, in case you're wondering. I really would love to just be down here walking around with you all, but well, with the camera up here, it won't work. So that's why I'm at least over here. How about that? I have notes just to keep myself to the 15 minutes I promised myself. I'm going to share some practical techniques with you on conducting business in the Middle East. And I'm going to focus that on communicating and interacting with potential customers and decision makers. So, many of those in the Middle East are going to have a cultural and communication style that's different from what you may have grown up with. So I'm going to share a little background and then share some very practical techniques with that. To illustrate some of the challenges that are involved, I do want to share a little bit about Dubai, because it is arguably the most diverse place on the planet. I frequently argue it's the most diverse. At least 82% of the people who live in Dubai are from somewhere else. So now all you math people out there, if you're, I think, export control will like shock, you gotta be good with all those numbers, right? So 82 minus 100 leaves me with 18, right? Yeah. So only 18% of the people who live in Dubai are from Dubai. So there are a lot of cultures and a lot of communication styles and a lot of challenges in that one place. I always say you can travel the world or you can go to Dubai. Now, personally, I chose to travel the world. I have been to all 7 continents and I have been to all 50 states. And I swear, I think I still see more diversity in Dubai than some of the other places I've been to. So there's a lot of different culture there from around the world, but then Dubai has its own unique history as well. The current ruler is Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. When Sheikh Mo, or Sheikh Mohammed, was growing up, living in his grandfather's, I hate to call it a castle, you might call it a palace, it was the royalist place in town. It had no electricity and no running water. And now Dubai has the tallest building in the world. And Sheikh Mohammed has seen that in his lifetime. So that gives you an idea of the cultural shift that has occurred in that place. They were able to do that growth because of the welcoming they have done from people and workers and professionals and experts around the world. They built that tallest building in the world in 6 years. And I started going to Dubai in 2007, so I got to see it being built. It was just amazing, because about the same time in Louisville, we were trying to build 2 bridges. We've been trying to build for 30 years, and it took us 30 some odd years to build 2 bridges, across the Ohio River, and Dubai is the tallest building in the world in 6 years. It just wasn't fair. And now we're spending 3 more years refixing the I-64 bridge across the river. And we talk about supply chain here, we talk about it globally, but those are local supply chain issues right there. So that's a little bit of the difference. Now I share this Dubai example because Dubai is different from the rest of the Middle East. And I'm going to share some communication techniques that are going to work in most places in the Middle East. But Dubai tends to be the point of entry for many people. They have set themselves up for that reason. They welcome the workers. They have an ease of doing business. Their forms and their regulations and everything is online. You can fill out everything you need to do online, and they have, I can't even keep count anymore in the number of free trade zones. It's well over a couple of dozen free trade zones. So they're designed, if you want to do business in the Middle East or actually anywhere around there, that's where many of you are going to start. So I want to say they are welcoming and they are different from the rest of the Middle East. So please be aware of both of those things. So now let me get into the practical techniques that fit most of the Middle East. And being the teacher that I am, we have to start with an interactive exercise, okay? And since I wasn't sure what technology we had, we went very old school with our visual aids here. This is a quick exercise of perspective to get us all ready to broaden our thoughts. So I have some colors here, and what you're all going to do is you're going to say the color it's printed in, not the word. For example, you're going to say brown for number 1. So number 2 would be blue. Number 3 would be green. Hard to see? Okay. Number 4 would be black. 5 would be purple.
Okay.
6 would be
Green.
7 would be brown. First of all, it's a little hard to see the visual. I get that. Okay. But it's even harder to do it differently. If we see the word yellow, we want to say the word yellow. That's what our brains used to do. So this is just to get you warmed up, so you can be thinking about some different perspectives. And then I want to share cultural dimensions and models, and there's lots of these out here, and there's not going to be a test, and I'm not going to drive into any theories. Some of you know a lot more about this than I do. Shadman, born and raised in Pakistan, so he's got the expertise there. Christine's been everywhere. So some of this you all already know. I'm hoping I share something a little new or a little different. Maybe it's the theory behind the practical that you're not aware of. Or maybe you know the theory not the practical not the theory. But here we go. The first one is, as we look at cultural dimensions, different cultures view time differently. Now you have probably observed this or witnessed this, but you may not have actually thought of it. We have monochronic time and polychromic time. Now it's monochronic, it is not monochromatic. Monochromatic would be if I'm wearing all one color. That's monochromatic. That's not. It's monochronic meaning singular. That's Americans. If we're having a meeting, we start this meeting at 2:15. At 2:15 we start the meeting. Polychronic says, well, we have multiple views of time. It might start at 2:15. I might wander at 3 o'clock. I'm really not that concerned about the numbers on the dial of the watch. I'm more concerned about other things. The Middle East is more polychronic. Let me also say, as I go through all of these dimensions, everybody's on a spectrum, and some people are farther than others, so that's my disclaimer. I'll try not to use the word tend to too much, but I don't talk in absolutes because every country within the Middle East, and even if you look at the UAE, Dubai is going to be different from Abu Dhabi. So you're going to have a lot of different. New York's different from Louisville, it's different from LA. But in general, the Middle East falls very much more on the polychronic. They're not as worried about something starting on time. You may be, so why do you care? A couple of things I want to share about that. First of all, when you're starting those email communications with that potential client, or with that existing client, or with that decision maker, as Americans, we want to put in deadlines. Please respond by 2 o'clock on Thursday. Because we're supposed to be specific. That's how we're trained. I do this when I do leadership training. That's what I tell the leader. Convey those expectations. In the Middle East, that's offensive. Please don't give me this deadline. I'll get to you when I can. So be aware of putting in those American deadlines when you're doing those things. When you are, and that's a very quick example. I had a situation where I had sent a proposal off to a client in Dubai. And I had also sent a proposal off for an article to an editor somewhere here in the US. We didn't hear back from either one. So I sent roughly the same nicely worded in what I call the Kelly language, which the Kelly language says, I'm the have a wonderful day kind of person. Those annoying people. So, and one of those annoying have a wonderful day. And I'm like, I'm not trying to rush you on your decision. I just wanted to make sure you received the proposal, and if so, I look forward to hearing from you after you've had a chance to review it. And basically sent that same message to Dubai and to the magazine editor. Dubai sent back a very terse message which said, please allow us time to review your materials. I had offended them. All I wanted to know was, can they get my email? Not only had I offended them, I never heard from the client again. That was it. I had overstepped my bounds, even though I tried my very best to be nice. Same email, went to the magazine editor, who sent me back, oh my goodness, no, I didn't get your first message, and yes, we'd love to have you write an article. And they pay for those articles. So that was good. You just never, it's hard. It's a fine line between how do you know if they're receiving and how do you know if they're not. Second one, on cultural dimensions, is direct versus indirect. In the United States, we speak directly. What I say is what I mean, here is how it is. The Middle East is more indirect, more subtle. Now, there are other countries that are even farther on the spectrum than they are, and if Nate wants to touch on this or not, even within the Middle East, some are going to be more indirect than others. But the why do you care is they are not going to say no to you like you might get as a response in the US. So you might send are you available to meet with me on Thursday? And instead, in the United States, we say, no, sorry, Christine, I can't do Thursday, I can do Wednesday or Tuesday, or Friday. But they're not ever going to say no. No, I can't meet with you on, what day did I ask? Thursday. Thank you. No, I can't meet with you on Thursday. They may say, well, I can meet with you the following Tuesday, and I'm not even going to be in Dubai anymore then. Why would you even just tell me you're not available? talk to your friends, and they view that communication very more indirectly than we do. So be ready for that. Say when you send a proposal to them, they're not going to say, no, we don't want your business. You're going to figure it out when you don't hear from them. Now, as a small business owner, I would much rather hear from you, no, we're not interested, than I would silence, because I'm wasting a lot of time trying to follow up and send additional things. But that's the way it is if you want to do business in the Middle East, because you're not going to get those immediate no's. So be prepared for that. Third dimension would be task versus relationship. In the United States, we are task-oriented. Not quite as task-oriented as, say, a Germany, perhaps, but we're not quite as direct as, say, a Germany. But by golly, get in there and get it done back to that deadline. Right? We sent you the email, it needs to be done on Tuesday. Middle East is more relationship. It's more about building relationships. So when you go to that meeting with them for the first time, and you need to go, now I understand with COVID, we've been doing Zoom, but before that, they needed to get on the plane, and you need to go over there, you need to meet the people. But you're not going to leave with the business. Not like here in the U.S. You're going to go over there in the meetings and get to know people, and then that's what they're going to ask for that proposal, which they will ask for whether they want to do business with you or not. Back to the you wish they would tell you. But the meetings are going to be about how's your trip and how's your family, and most of you know this. I'm looking around the audience going, okay, I'm trying to figure out what to share and what you know. And just a reminder that you're going to drown in tea and water or coffee, depending on the situation, and you still never say no to it. And you are going to be so tired of saying, how are you enjoying Riyadh or Dubai or Abu Dhabi or wherever it is you happen to be, and how's the family, and all of, because that's business for them, because they do business with people they're comfortable with. Again, you all, I'm guessing most of you know this, so my takeaway here is just a reminder to be patient and think a little bit about why that's important to them. Why do you think that's important to them? Let's see how I'm doing on my time. I think I want to share one last thing. Yeah.
Just if you could elaborate on the use of inshallah, of how it can go anyway. How you say like you do it or yeah, you're not going to do it. That kind of thing. So
Inshallah, if God wills it, or if God is willing,
Yes.
it's something, I frankly put that in a lot of my emails. I will see you on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, inshallah, if God is willing. And that's what you will hear from them all the time. And it's not like, I hope nobody here is from Canada and takes offense, but it's not like the Canadian A. A, you spell Canada with 3 letters, C-A-N-A-D-A. It's not quite like that. It really is a mindset, a way of life. We'll be at the meeting, inshallah. We will work together, inshallah. There's an old...
it can be an acceptance and an denial at
Yes.
the same time.
Exactly.
So
Or
that's
an
why
excuse for being late.
Excuses can be anything in one word, everything. So
Absolutely. There is an old country saying that I always think of it. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. And that's where my small town in southern Indiana expression, but that's a lot of the inshallah as well. So I want to wrap up with
I don't
this.
think it's anything negative there. It's more about their cultural behavior.
Well,
That's
and-
what they're
it's sometimes when they say inshallah, this means like let's do this deal or let's proceed. And they might say inshallah, it might actually go there. It's not going to be done. So you leave it on the side. You only can leave it on God. And the other can be also, we will do it because God will. So it goes both ways. So that's why we call the inshallah situation. Which means you don't know whether is it yes or is it no. So that's the tricky part. And then also even the world itself, in Middle East and South Asia, based on where it is, can be what percentage is it acceptance and what percentage is it saying no but blaming it on God. That kind of situation. So it's very tricky.
Well, and I think the point here, I can wrap up because I want to get over to make here, is that it depends even where in the Middle East you're from. This is more of a Pakistan Pakistan, so that's the Pakistan, thank you. Every region is going to have a little different, and it will also depend on who we are interacting with and how they think we might interpret it. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty of that, which is my perfect wrap-up for my section before I turn it to Nate, and then we're just going to open it, as I said, to questions. My wrap-up is the reminder to be aware. Okay, different isn't wrong. I just really encourage you not to say that in your brain that they're doing it wrong. They're simply doing it differently than what our perspective might be. And I find it really helps me if I dig a little deeper to find out why. Why don't they want to say no? Why do they run late? Why? I like to understand a little more of the reasoning of the whys, and that helps me be more patient with it and understand the perspective. So that's I hope your takeaway is to simply be more aware. Even if you already knew everything I said, to even be more aware. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate.
Thanks, Kelly. I took a few notes from Kelly's presentation, but first of all, I do need to say my own disclaimer. My views are purely my own opinion and are not the official company policy of General Motors Defense. So now that we have that disclaimer out of the way, let me go ahead and redouble on what she said. IBM, not International Business Machines, but inshallah, mumkin. If God wills it tomorrow, maybe. So you have to get used to hearing that quite a bit in the Middle East. Rare is it that an Arab will tell you no. Rather, it's inshallah, if God wills it, bukra, tomorrow, maybe. Okay, that's part of their culture of doing business. It's considered inhospitable and insulting to say no to someone. She mentioned the fact that the Burj Dubai was built in 6 years. That's the world's smallest building. I need to correct myself. It's now the Burj Khalifa, because during when the bubble burst in Dubai in 2008, 2009, it was the family of Sheikh Khalifa of Abu Dhabi who bailed out Dubai. Therefore, they renamed the Burj Dubai the Burj Khalifa instead. Venturing out beyond the United Arab Emirates, as she mentioned, things happen quickly in the UAE. Things happen quickly when you have such visionary emirs in charge as you have in the UAE. Indeed, it's a country that has advanced tremendously in just a generation. Kuwait is probably the counterweight to Dubai in terms of the speed of doing business in the Middle East. In my experience with quoting projects to the Kuwait Ministry of Education, projects that I quoted in 2010 did not come to fruition until 2017, 7 years in the making. Whereas in Dubai, typically it's 7 months in the making for a project from start to finish, from the time you first bid until you receive that purchase order. So it is a difference, polychromatic versus monochromatic time. You'll find that being as westernized as it is, the United Arab Emirates is probably far more punctual, probably far more monochromatic than any other part of the Middle East, save Israel. Okay? It's interesting that, in my opinion, the biggest foreign policy success of the Trump administration would have been the Abraham Accords. Who would have thought that we would see peace between Israel and more than just Egypt and Jordan, but a peace first between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, followed by a peace with Bahrain, then a peace with Morocco, and then a peace with Sudan. The Abraham Accords are not finished, though. Before long, we will see peace between Israel and Oman and Qatar. I would say those are next on the list based on commercial ties between those countries at this point. Kelly also mentioned relationships, task versus relationships. I'm thankful to have made many friends throughout the Middle East during my time working for Draper. Many of those relationships I have been able to leverage on into the defense industry being that it's different from my previous industry. And thankfully, I've been able to take both of my daughters with me on business to Israel and Jordan, and they were welcomed into the homes of distributors who have become friends of mine, as readily as I was over the years. But that did not happen overnight. It took years of trust to build up. And too often in this country, the American businessman is tasked with accomplishing the mission in a strafe bombing trip, as I call it. A trip to the Middle East, Monday through Friday. Granted, it takes 2 days to get there. You'll leave this country on Monday. You won't land in the Middle East until Tuesday evening. You want to get the business done Wednesday and Thursday, and then fly home midnight Thursday night, getting back home by late Friday afternoon, early Friday evening. Too often, that's what American companies, American employers demand, but it takes more than that in the Middle East to cultivate those relationships. There is a big difference also between doing business in the United Arab Emirates and the other oil wealthy Gulf countries and doing business in what I call the poor Middle East. The difference between an Egypt and a Jordan, though, and the Gulf countries is, in Egypt and Jordan, you'll actually be dealing with Arabs. You'll be dealing with Egyptians and Jordanians. Who can tell me who will the Western businessman most likely be dealing with in the oil-rich Gulf countries and business deals?
Expats.
Expats, specifically from where?
US.
Indians. Okay? 70% of the expat community in the Gulf, the oil-rich Gulf countries, are from India. Who can tell me where are most of those from India from within the Gulf?
Mumbai?
No, you're close though. Kerala. There are more Keralites as a percentage among the expat population of Indians in the Gulf countries than anywhere else. So it's very interesting. I will have to admit, my Arabic skills have atrophied over the years because you've got to go where the business is. And my previous employer, Draper, had far more business in the oil-rich Gulf countries than we had in places like Egypt and Jordan. Therefore, as a result, I wasn't able to speak Arabic as often as I had hoped, and my skills have atrophied. However, when I'm back in Egypt and Jordan, it comes back to me bit by bit, and typically I'll ask my distributors to, dampen the English and increase the Arabic to help my skills out. So at this point, I think I'll shut up, and I think we'll open it to questions. That's the beauty of the two-person panel, plenty of Q&A time. I really appreciate this conference the past couple of days, but too often when you have a moderator and 3 panelists, before you know it, there's only about 5 minutes left at the end for Q&A. So the floor is yours.
Yes, they still want you to walk up to the mic unless you can talk really loudly in the line.
Sure.
Just because they're recording it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have been doing some business in the Middle East over years in Qatar, or the continent, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. But as years have gone by, they get more and more protective of fabrication in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates. You need to be closely aligned with the people, the companies in those countries. Agents, do you have any recommendations or suggestions, or have you experienced something similar? Or?
I'll take that. Yes, the Saudi Arabian Standards Organization, SASO, S-A-S-O, they aren't as onerous as, say, Germany's TÜV Rheinland standards, but if you make a product with an electric motor, it now must pass the SASO standards to be allowed to enter the country. That wasn't always the case. Previously, you could sell pretty much any product with either a 220 volt motor or a 110 volt motor in Saudi Arabia. And the 110 volt motor products are because Aramco, formerly known as the Arabian American Oil Company, had developed so much of the infrastructure in Saudi Arabia that even the 110 volt electric grids were the same 110 volts that you would find here in the United States. However, since the imposition of SASO, and I'm no electrical engineer, but I just know the SASO regulations because I had to deal with this on a daily basis. In the United States, our electricity is 110 volts, 60 hertz. In Saudi Arabia, it's being increasingly converted to either 220 or 110 volts, 50 hertz. And so having motors that could fit Saudi Arabia for the case of a motorized projection screen or window shades or things like that, that was something you always had to make sure that you were manufacturing properly in your factory to comply with the Saudi Arabian Standards Organization. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, but it's also more about the protection. You need X% of Saudi content, all that. Do you know anything familiar with that?
Okay, I have heard that that was coming. That did not affect my former employer. But I do know from the defense industry, in order to win tenders with foreign ministers of defense in many countries now, you have to do that. You have to do localization and homologation, as it's called, to allow for X percentage of domestic content in order to win the contract. Although I'm not familiar with that specifically in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you.
See, when you ask a question, you get to stretch your legs. There's a bonus.
Exactly, yes. All right, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the great insights. So, selling products, machinery, like in our case, the company that I work for is one thing, servicing is another thing. And one thing that has been a challenge for our company is actually servicing the equipment in other parts of the world. So that is actually what's hindering us from exporting. So, in your opinion, do you think it's easier to hire locals, like for example in the Middle East, train them on your equipment, or do you take your current employees and you train them and prepare them basically for the assignments in the Middle East?
In the case of defense products, you have to use your own people for obvious reasons. However, if it's non-defense products, I would highly recommend finding a local partner, most likely located in the Jebel Ali free zone between Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Thank you.
And let me see what other questions come up, and then I might mention memorization if it's relevant. Unless you have anything else specific.
Did you use the commercial service to help you with your instant get distributors for trade work? Did you use commercial service to help you, or have you used it for that?
I have done the Gold Key program for Brazil and Germany. However, I have never needed to do that in the Middle East. We typically attracted distributors, whether by word of mouth or because of trade shows. And that's how I was able to basically build up the Middle East from scratch for Draper.
Yeah, use that.
And I will add to that, in terms of Dubai, the commercial service agents there are extremely busy and have been for years. In fact, they suspended doing Gold Key for a while. They simply could not keep up with all of the interest that was there in Dubai. Not to mention that with Dubai being such a huge marketplace, you know, they have expos, they have conventions, there's always some way that you can go and market the products yourself. And again, the language of business is English. It is much more westernized, so it lends itself to being easier to do business there on your own, I would say. But just in terms of the commercial service, they have just been crazy busy for about the past 10 years. And that's a definitive term, by the way, crazy busy. I don't know if they've opened back up the gold keys or not, but though, as I said, they had just suspended them for quite a while.
Yes, sir.
Really great talk. Thank you so much. This Draper analogy or example is very interesting from the perspective you asked about service. I used to go all around the world to find partners for some mechanical and electronic gear too. Insulation is very, very important. And that was a problem you did it. Somehow you opened that region to Draper. Where Draper are 6 years ago?
20 years. Well, I was 21 and a half years with Draper, but after my first 20 years, Draper disbanded its export department due to the aluminum tariff and the steel tariff.
And I think that makes a very important point that we talk about as an export specialist. You only get one chance to make a great first impression. It's going to be really hard for Draper to probably ever really go back and excel in that market. Would that be correct?
No other Draper employee is willing to go to the Middle East beyond Dubai. I was able to get my boss to come with me to Dubai, but he was afraid to venture anywhere else beyond that.
Is it privately held company, is it right?
I'm sorry?
Is that a privately held company?
It is,
I thought
yes.
so. I've seen their ads in the Wall Street Journal and such. But you still have a lot of Draper gear there. Is there anyone servicing it at all now, or how does that work? Because you've got some amount of responsibility by selling. I'm sure that some of those automated systems were pretty expensive.
Draper has a distributor in Dubai, but Draper is one of like 20 brands carried by this distributor. So there really isn't the service that's necessary to help to service projection streams that break down and that type of thing.
And so it just eventually will be pulled down and thrown out and some other brands come along. So it's just that's one of the tough things about going global. And your question that we talked earlier about the equipment you guys make, it is a big challenge. Draper's a bigger company, substantial. So revenue is hundreds of millions, I guess, annually, perhaps. Is that correct for the overall company?
Since it's privately held, I can't comment.
It's hard to know, right? But regardless, you guys are a small company, right?
Or you come to another company, I mean, there's ways to do it.
It's tough, though, for a smaller one, but you can do it, but it takes some time, as you did 20 years to find those partners. Thank you for that hard work.
Something that I'd like to mention, I'm not an author like Kelly is. She had her own book. I did not write this book, but this is a book I'm currently reading, The Power of Geography by Tim Marshall. Tim Marshall is an Australian reporter, and his original book was called Prisoners of Geography. I haven't read that one yet, but The Power of Geography, he basically tells about 10 countries in the world that are punching above their weight geopolitically and socioeconomically due to their geographic locations. 5 of these 10, however, are future flashpoints for conflict. But this is a very intriguing book that I would recommend to all of you. And several of the countries in here are in the Middle East. I can't think of anything else specific on the Middle East, but for Draper, if it was a difficult market, it went to me. If it was one of those parts of the world that no one else wanted to go to, it went to me. And I've gotten majorly ill before. India hospitalized me one time, not in India, but when I got back to the United States. But the experiences that I've had opening places like Central Asia, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa for Draper, in addition to the Middle East, I wouldn't give anything for. And the Lord has blessed me in many ways, including my current job with GM Defense. So I urge those of you looking to do business in challenging markets, whether it be the Middle East or some of the others that I mentioned, don't be afraid. Don't shy away from it, because as you probably heard from some of the other sessions here today, it's often very, very appreciated if an American firm even makes the attempt to come to your country and do business.
And I will wrap up with saying that if you are headed into new territory or expanding the territory you're already in, just recognize there's a lot of resources out there. And I think this is a nice tag team to see. There's the technical resources, there's the soft side resources that look at your local decks, utilize those resources, and just don't be afraid to ask for help, because there's people out there that want to share their story. Don't let anything keep you from the adventure. Because that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is. It's an adventure. So don't let anything keep you from that. We'll officially wrap up, and then if you all want to ask us some more, we'll finish up. I'm sorry, yes?
One point, which actually I missed an opportunity because of that small difference of language, which is to and through. So Pakistan, and then many places in the Middle East, I was supposed to go to attend a conference, and the message I got was it's going to be noon through 3. Now, where we come from, noon means the whole afternoon. So when you're dealing with Middle East, that noon would be the whole afternoon. So I thought it meant 3 in the afternoon. Noon through 3, throughout the afternoon, but you show up at 3 o'clock. So I showed up at 2 o'clock, expecting to be early, an hour early, and it was already done. I missed that opportunity many years ago, and when we have international students coming in, I always give them this example, that this is the big difference between the English in the US and the system and then there. Because here noon means 12 o'clock. In those places, the afternoon is noon. So that might be the whole afternoon, and some point when someone tells you, we'll meet you at noon, you expect roughly a couple of hours within that window you're going to be meeting them. And this has happened to me, and I missed a big opportunity because of that. So anytime there's this thing, I always say the noon through and to. That's a big difference. Sorry to jump in. Sorry.
Let me add to that, recognizing that when you all know this, when you travel places, just because they speak English doesn't mean it's American English. When I come back from Dubai, my family always laughs at me for the first 3 days because I'm speaking British English. I'm looking for the boot. I'm on my mobile. And, and it takes me a day to adjust while I'm there because it's all British English. Or recognizing that everyone there is speaking English, but it's not their first language. And even the British that are there, it's not American English, so it's still not their first language. Are there any British in the room that can laugh at that? Anyway, so just a quick reminder of the issues with language, and so the teacher in me will give you this last absolute tip. You know it, please use it. Be very careful with your English when you're communicating with others. Watch your idioms, watch your expressions. Please slow down and be careful with what you're saying. Sometimes it's hard to understand us.
What Shotman and Kelly mentioned reminded me of something else. Time. Again, a tolerance for ambiguity, a tolerance for polychromatic rather than monochromatic time. It takes a lot of tolerance for ambiguity to do business in the Middle East, especially in Kuwait. You may have an appointment with a deputy minister of education that you had scheduled 2 weeks ago. You may have bought your airline ticket to fly home that night right after the appointment, but then you arrive for the appointment only to be told by the deputy minister's gatekeeper, oh, come back tomorrow, the minister's busy. So then you invariably have to call the airline and reschedule your ticket. That only happened to me once, but again, it's something that you need to expect. Just expect the unexpected, but it can pay off tremendously later because so few other American companies are willing to play the game and willing to do business there. Also, the British English term that she mentioned, your publications, any brochures or marketing material outside of the United States, it behooves you to publish it in British English rather than American English. as well as metric rather than imperial. And to publish it in other languages if it's cost effective for your particular target markets.
We can give tips all day, but I think they want to go home. Thank you all. If you all have more questions, ask us now, ask us later. We're happy to be available. So thank you guys.